All right, everyone. Donald Trump should ignore the judge's order with regards to DACA. A judge from the D.C. Circuit said, well, the federal government must restart DACA completely. That means you have to accept new applications, not just what they've been doing is they issued an injunction on removing the renewal of existing applications. Now, I would point this out. DACA is basically just an executive order extended to some bureaus. It's a purely executive function. I would also point out people who are illegally in the United States are not covered by the Constitution in any way, shape, or form. In no meaningful way does the Constitution guarantee anything for illegal immigrants, or even for legal immigrants until they achieve residency in some citizen status or sub-citizen status. They're covered by different rights, by certain international norms that we've agreed to, by human rights in the most basic sense. That's what covers them, not the Constitution. For a judge to declare that an executive cannot repeal an existing executive order in order to de-administer a program that itself ignores properly passed legislative agenda for several decades is itself unconstitutional and should be ignored. No person has a responsibility to go along with something that is so blatantly unconstitutional. By the way, there's a totally different court related to Texas that is likely to actually go against this and rule in the opposite direction. There are two separate cases. The D.C. case, this is a state decision, has said you must restart DACA. In Texas, it's almost certain that they're going to find DACA unconstitutional, thus setting up an extensive constitutional crisis where the federal government, led by Trump and his administration, will argue we have the right to end an executive order. This is not a legislative thing that we're trying to end. We're simply getting rid of the executive order that causes the program to exist fundamentally in the first place. It is meant to be deferred action, not permanent ignoring of immigration law. His opponents, which will include various groups, pro-immigrant movements, the Democratic Party, certain states, they'll say, no. Trump doesn't have the right to enforce immigration laws duly passed by Congress and by multiple presidents. That's what they'll essentially be arguing. Now, they won't use that language, but that's what it stands for. He should ignore the decision. The deportations should continue because it is legal for him to do that. He should simply ignore the order. What exactly can the federal court do if he does? If a separate court has said, no, DACA itself is what's unlawful. It's perfectly fine for him to remove this executive order. He shouldn't be enforcing it in the first place. Well, then I guess he's got the go-ahead to do exactly what he wants now, doesn't he? Now, it's not the judiciary doesn't get to step in and decide yay or nay an executive order's repeal is constitutional. They can determine whether the executive order is. Like when Obama attempted to use executive action, I think this was in the second to last year of his presidency. You'll remember he tried to pass an executive order legalizing a bunch of people, saying, I'm granting you amnesty. The court stepped in and said, no, you can't do that through executive order. That requires the legislature. You can't do that on your own. That's because the judiciary has the right to weigh in on laws and executive orders when they're being passed. What precedent is there for saying, hey, you can't repeal this executive order? That's a totally different thing. You are inactivating something that was passed by executive action. The executive privilege is involved with DACA. DACA simply means the executive branch under Obama decided to instruct certain bureaus related to immigration and law enforcement not to enforce laws that were already duly passed by past legislatures. That is, the legislature passed laws regarding immigration. Executives in the past signed these laws. They became laws. They were not challenged by the courts. The Supreme Court didn't say they were wrong. Nobody had a problem with them. The Democrats themselves supported them wildly, voted for them, even proposed them sometimes. A lot of them had to do with Bill Clinton's era. Didn't even have to do with Republicans. It was fucking Bill Clinton, a fucking liberal. They said, Obama did, I am simply not going to have these particular parts of the law enforced. I'm instructing catch and release, for example. Yeah, it's under the law we're supposed to, apprehend people who are illegally here. They're breaking the law. I'm simply going to let them go immediately. So yeah, we still have to catch them, but we don't have to process them. We don't have to imprison them. We're just going to let them go. Even if the person might be a fucking axe murderer, they're not being processed, so who cares? They'll remain totally undocumented. This was one of the darkest hours of the Obama presidency, was implementing this program. Even a lot of Democrats are like, yeah, Mr. President, I'm not sure this is a good, pragmatic political decision to make. I think it might become a mess down the road. And by the way, Obama never sought the consent of the legislature to reform the immigration system. If he had wanted to legalize people, he should have worked with the legislature. That's how the government's supposed to function. You can't simply say the fact that we have a separation of powers is bad and wrong because I want to pass a piece of fucking legislation, so I'm just going to ignore it and operate in an autocratic fashion. That's how dictatorships and oligarchies start. That's how a republic dies. When you begin weighing pragmatism as more important than the proper structure of a constrained government, you no longer have a constrained government. Obama legislated largely by executive order because he didn't work well with Congress and didn't want to negotiate with them. Trump has the exact opposite style of leadership. He is reluctant, it seems, to use executive orders. Largely, his executive orders repeal existing ones. Or they have to do with functions that have always been executive, a tariff or something like that, have nothing to do maybe with the regular structures of government per se. He seems reluctant. Like the Schumer came out and like basically forced him to pass an executive order on this very issue. He's like, well, you can keep these immigrant families together. Just pass an executive order. It would be too time consuming for us to fucking negotiate on immigration. It wouldn't. That's bullshit. That's Schumer's way of saying, hey, an election is coming up, and I don't want to negotiate with Trump because I don't want every moderate Democrat in the country to lose their job when we have no choice but to fund your fucking border wall. Because our constituents think that it's racist. Our constituents think that it's okay to ignore existing law because it's mean and bad and wrong. So instead of repealing it and finding a new system to use, instead of doing what makes sense and is actually legal, just use an executive order like our good friend Obama used to do. No, this judge should be totally ignored. The judiciary does not have any purview to block the repeal of an executive order. It is perfectly and 100% completely within Trump's constitutional right as the chief executive to eliminate executive orders where he finds it appropriate. Because they're just executive orders. They were never weighed in on in their implementation by the judiciary. Unless there was a legal case. In some cases there was, like with Obama's attempted amnesty. I think it was 1.4 million people that would have been legalized by his executive order. Court stepped in and said, you can't do that. They're not going to become legal. You can defer action, that's fine, but you can't legalize them unilaterally. Congress has to be involved. But he never wanted to do that. See, he didn't want to have to work with a Republican Congress. He would have had to negotiate. Oh my God, he would have had to have actually fixed the problem. That would have been so terrible. That's what the Democrats are doing now. They simply don't want to negotiate. Trump's come in and said, hey, yeah, I'm willing to give you all sorts of stuff. But it starts with the fucking wall. I promised my constituents the wall. The American people want immigration reform, including a wall. What are you doing? But Schumer and all of his cronies, they don't want that. They just want 100% of what they want, just like the Republicans wanted when Obama was president. In all honesty, Obama wanted it too. They weren't willing to negotiate. Boehner and Obama didn't get along. They weren't willing to talk to each other. Trump has been willing to talk to Democrat and Republican alike, but the thing is, they're stonewalling. They're convinced after the midterms they'll be able to impeach him or some magical shit. Some stupid magical bullshit is going to save them. No, if you keep obstructing, in 2020 there will end up being a supermajority of Republicans and Trump will ram through basically whatever he wants without negotiating at all. You'll be stuck using the Ninth Circuit, weaponizing it continuously, and you won't be able to do that forever either. Eventually that will flip too. It's going to be really, really funny. That's about all. Peace out.